At the start of the First World War, pipe smoking was by far the biggest form of tobacco consumption. But the problem with these things was, just where does a chap put his blasted pipe? There's nowhere to put it. Okay, joking aside, this thing is pretty horrible, and there's nothing good here. Visually, I look at it and I instantly feel a complete absence of the good. In fact, it's no stretch to say it looks like something out of a nightmare. Its use only for a realm, surely, created by beings consumed by their own darkness or their own lust for power, for control and domination. Breathing is perhaps the very symbol of life, and this horrible piece of equipment has been made for a place which rendered breathing, living impossible, a place which preferred death. The author J.R.R. Tolkien had a name for such a place. We probably all know it, and it's perhaps more real than we may think: the land of Mordor. In this short video, I want to try to explore what Tolkien, a veteran of the calamitous First World War, tells us about evil. I have to say, the helmet, the gentleman's pipe, I have no issues with. In fact, I can imagine Lieutenant Tolkien waving this around on the front lines. I'm a bit of a history geek, I've got to confess, but the gas mask is such a horrid reminder of what happened in the blood-soaked stalemate of that war in the trenches of France and Belgium. The fact that neither side could make any serious gains and so resorted to new machinery and weapons of murder like the tank and what essentially amounted to throwing poisonous gas at each other. If there was any greater image of the dehumanization brought about by the futility of war, it has to be that of the 20th century gas mask. It removes the face, the eyes, the smile, leaving a blank, soulless visage, turning the appearance of a man with a name, a soul, into that of an anonymous beast, a fitting inhabitant for this new hellscape we created in the war to end all wars. A hell on earth brought about, it seems, by human failing of epic proportions. I'm aware YouTube is full of Tolkien experts, so I'll just say now, I'm not a Lord of the Rings expert, just someone who thoroughly enjoys the movies and the 3 books. But Tolkien created what many believe to be the greatest work of fiction of the 20th century, certainly of fantasy fiction. The movies have doubtless made billions in revenue at the box office. So many modern people are simply obsessed with his world, unaware, perhaps, how Tolkien himself was
I'm a Roman Catholic.
a Christian, unaware that his books are soaked with a kind of Christian morality and a Christian worldview, even if Tolkien dresses his world up visually with images from Northern European folklore. What interests me is the fact that Tolkien lived through that horrific war and emerged with his faith intact. None of us have probably experienced anything remotely near to the horrors of the trenches, yet the problem of evil and of human suffering is often a great barrier for us in the 21st century when approaching ideas about believing in God, believing in the ultimate good who created everything for a purpose. And we often struggle to come to a belief that matter, the world, the universe itself, is good, which is quite odd given how comfortably we live today when compared with our forebears. You know, every seat is cushioned, the heating is switched up to full. But so many of us will simply say, and I know I've been there as an agnostic, how could God have created all of this? And one can imagine Lieutenant Tolkien standing and looking over no man's land and perhaps asking a similar question. Yet he did believe profoundly in the power of the Christian story and in the historicity of Christ and of the profound truth within the Christian tradition. He's well known for sharing a similar view to his good friend and one-time atheist C.S. Lewis, that myth became fact in the events described in the Christian Gospels, and that myths, narratives, incarnate truths which would otherwise be inexpressible. We may think here of the creation story of Genesis today. There's a profound truth in that poetic story which we obviously ignore at our peril. The fact that yes, this universe was created, it had a beginning, but crucially, that we humans choose to turn away from the good. We've chosen to turn away from the good. And surely we turn away from it all of the time. We recognize that fact in our own lives, if only intuitively. So we may say that yes, the opening chapters of Genesis tread in a beautiful mythic imagery, the fruit, the tree in the garden, but ultimately that the fall of humanity which is conveyed therein is a profound truth. The story is a means to succinctly express what would otherwise be impossible to express. You certainly couldn't express it with a formula in a textbook. It's not a stretch to see Mordor in the destruction which the first industrialized war brought about in Tolkien's own age. We see the ring of power in man's desire to dominate at almost any cost, in the millions of German, British, and French soldiers killed. What I find incredible about Tolkien is that he looks at his war and sees evil, sees human failings, and yes, human sin. What other word could we use? He sees all of this, but remains steadfast in his belief in the supreme good. He sees all of this horror and misery brought about by the smog of industry, and yes, admittedly, he's a bit jaded by it, a man who hated practically all forms of technology, railways and phones, but he doesn't fall into the role of a mere polemicist. He believes that there's an opposite to all of this. There's a supreme good. There is dark, and so there's light. One reveals the truth of the other. Yet he remains deeply unconvinced that good exists in people, in nations, or in tribes.
You never personalise or personify goodness.
Well, that's, I suppose, an actual conscious reaction from a war, from the stuff that I was brought up in a war to end wars, that kind of stuff, which I didn't believe in at the time and believe in less now.
Frodo cannot ultimately destroy the ring, and even Gandalf forbids himself from accepting it.
You cannot offer me this ring.
I'm giving it to you!
Don't tempt me, Frodo. I dare not take it.
None of us can truly be trusted, says Tolkien. There are perhaps no saints in Middle-earth, perhaps because Tolkien saw no saints himself on the Western Front. The evil Lord Sauron mirrors the Satan, the deceiver, the tempter of all mankind, which the Christian tradition speaks of. A fallen elf or a fallen angel, take your pick. And yes, the loving sacrifice of Christ is briefly revealed as faint flickers in the actions of some of the heroes, who at times will shine out that light. But still they are not that light. As Jesus of Nazareth said before his self-sacrificial death, "Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends." In the most dramatic way possible, he showed that the way to overcome the fallen world is to give. Give your being, give on every level to overcome the pitfalls. Give your time, your energy, your love, give your money, give your wisdom. I'm not a theologian, and this is obviously a simplification, but in the context of his story and mission, once we moderns can acknowledge our human failings, this becomes very clear. Now I, like Tolkien, am a proud Englishman, but share what he came out of that war understanding, that the human race is deeply flawed, regardless of flag or anthem. And it makes one think of what Alexander Solzhenitsyn, a victim of the monstrous communist machine, had to say on the subject, that the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. The enduring appeal of Tolkien's great master myth is that it shows fallible heroes who can be reached by darkness.
I tried to take the ring from him. Forgive me.
Striving nevertheless for that good against seemingly unsurmountable odds. They're striving for a good which seems to exist somewhere, perhaps not on this earth, but somewhere. And if we agree with Solzhenitsyn and Tolkien's joint observations, it of course begs the question, to where do we turn for that light to see us through such trials in this age as in every age? Had Tolkien been so famous in his own lifetime, people would doubtless have laughed at what he personally had to say about the tools man makes, seemingly for more convenience in the middle part of the last century, but ultimately, as Tolkien well knew, for simply more and more power. Power that corrupts, power that corrodes humanity, power that, let us suppose, a being like Sauron were to exist, he should utterly love for us to rigorously pursue. People would have laughed at Tolkien's mistrust of planes, trains and automobiles, much like the little hobbits of his own creation mistrusted Gandalf's magic. They would have chuckled at this old fogey, this man seemingly living in a fantasy world of the Middle Ages, not on board with the modern project. Tolkien died back in 1973, and in our busy, hectic world which promises more novelties, more comfort, more machines to serve us, we may admire his fiction, but look at what he had to say personally, grumbling with his pipe in his mouth, and still chuckle. I certainly have in the past. Yet if we stop and look around us, we'll realise that we're now all a long, long way away from the green meadows of the Shire. Instead, we're in a place tangled in the very machinery we made for our promised deliverance, a vast electrical web, in a place alien to all of humanity where so few people ever see the stars for the bulbs of the streetlights, with idle gazes upon the eternal glare of screens, a place with vanished communities at the behest of our closest friend, the television, not to mention a deep meaning and mental health crisis as we've uprooted ourselves from basic fellowship with others, from the natural direction and rhythms of existence. Observing all of that, we may wish to look back at the pipe-smoking Tolkien in his tweed jacket, the spirit of the eternal old fogey, and admit soberingly, we're not laughing now. It's of course easy and almost satisfying to make those kinds of observations, to curse the darkness, but there is a light. There is a light. It's better to warm ourselves in the candle than to curse the darkness. I do believe that. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe for more videos coming very soon.